Have you ever found yourself standing in front of a closed door, emotionally, metaphorically, wishing you could go back just a few days? Just a few words earlier? Just one decision sooner? You tell yourself you were just being patient, waiting for the right moment, trying not to make a mistake. But let's be honest, was it patience or fear? See, we all do it. We wait. We overthink. We assume we've got time. We believe life will give us another chance, a clearer signal, a perfect moment. But life? Life doesn't promise open doors forever. And that's where this begins. This isn't just about one regret. It's about a pattern, a way of living that fools us into thinking we're being careful, when in fact we're slowly losing everything we value. It shows up in relationships most of all. How many people wait too long to say what they feel, to fight for what matters, or to walk away when something's clearly broken? How many of us lose someone, not because they changed, but because we hesitated until there was nothing left to hold on to? And when the door finally closes, we call it unfair. We wonder how it came to this. But deep down, we know. In this video, we're pulling back the curtain on that moment, the moment people wait too long, and the door closes for good. We'll unpack the beliefs that trap us. We'll examine real consequences. We'll feel that sting of regret, yes, but also learn how to stop repeating the pattern. This isn't self-help fluff. It's about facing uncomfortable truths, with a stoic mindset that doesn't sugarcoat reality but gives us power over it. This is about taking control before the opportunity vanishes. You're going to see yourself in this story? Maybe in the waiting. Maybe in the silence. Maybe in the finality. But you'll also see the turning point, what Stoicism teaches us about seizing the moment, honoring what matters, and finding clarity even in loss. There's a kind of freedom on the other side of that closed door, but only if we face it honestly. That's what we're doing today. So stay with me, because the most important part of this video isn't just the regret. It's what you do next. And trust me, you don't want to miss the part where everything shifts. Ready? 1. The illusion of infinite time. We think we have time. That belief is the most persistent illusion most people live under. Not because they're lazy or careless, but because everything around them, from culture to comfort to distraction, tells them tomorrow is guaranteed. So we scroll. We delay the conversation. We tell ourselves, not yet, without realizing that, not yet, quietly turns into never. We treat time as if it's a storage room we can dip into whenever we feel ready. But readiness is a lie we tell ourselves to avoid discomfort. How many moments have slipped through your hands because you were waiting to feel prepared? How many times have you known what you needed to say, needed to do, but you told yourself you'd do it later, after work, after the weekend, after the fear fades? Let me ask you something real. When was the last time you did something important without being completely ready, without knowing the outcome? If you can't remember, that's not caution. It's paralysis. And paralysis is deadly in relationships, in goals, in anything that requires presence. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that death was not only inevitable but could come at any time. Not as a morbid thought, but as a motivator. Because when you hold that awareness close, every hour becomes sharper. Every opportunity is heavy with meaning. Yet most people live as if they've been granted an extension that never expires. They think they'll have the same energy tomorrow, the same access, the same people. But time doesn't freeze, and neither do the hearts of those around you. People move on. Circumstances shift. Doors shut, not out of cruelty, but because all things, including chances, have a natural life cycle. And if you don't act within that window, you're not just waiting, you're walking away, whether you admit it or not. And here's what hurts the most. People often realize the door is closing while they're still standing in front of it, but they still don't move. They watch the opportunity fade and tell themselves they'll find another one. But some doors don't reopen. Some people don't wait forever. And when you see the look in someone's eyes that tells you they've stopped hoping you'll change, stopped waiting for you to show up, it's already over. That's the moment you feel it in your chest, that twist of regret. And you start saying things like, I thought we had more time. You didn't. You had exactly as much time as you used. That's the brutal math of reality. The minutes you let pass are not neutral. They accumulate into a result. A decision not made becomes a path chosen by default. And most people don't understand they're making choices simply by doing nothing. You don't have to slam a door shut to lose access to it. All you have to do is stand still long enough. And don't confuse this with fate or destiny. This isn't about the universe conspiring against you. This is about your will, your clarity, and your courage. Because while you're busy waiting for certainty, someone else is making the call, sending the message, taking the step. The difference between who grows and who regrets isn't talent or luck, it's movement. It's knowing that time is not your property. You are a guest in time, and your invitation ends at an unknown hour. This is why Stoicism isn't just philosophy, it's a weapon against self-sabotage. It strips away excuses and forces you to confront the fragility of your window. In Stoic relationships, especially, the moments you think you can skip, saying, I love you, asking for what you need, being honest about the problem, are often the very moments that define the outcome. You don't get unlimited chances to show up for someone. You get the ones you take. And people feel when you're taking them for granted, even when you say nothing. The silence speaks. The delay communicates. And eventually, they believe what your inaction tells them, that they don't matter enough to be a priority. That's how you lose people you never meant to lose. That's how time becomes your enemy, not because it betrayed you, but because you misread the contract. Time isn't patient. It isn't personal. It just moves. And it takes everything with it, unless you learn to move with intention. That's the essence of Stoicism, not control over what happens, but over how you act in the narrow space where action is possible. That space is shrinking every day, but most of us only notice when it's gone. We wake up one morning and realize the relationship is over, the spark is dead, the chance has moved on. And the most painful part isn't even the loss. It's knowing that we could have done something. That if we had only acted sooner, braver, with more clarity, things might have turned out differently. But might have is a cold comfort. It doesn't open doors. It just haunts you. So ask yourself, what are you postponing right now that actually matters? What conversation, decision, or action have you delayed because it's uncomfortable? And more importantly, do you think the door will still be open when you finally get around to it? Don't assume so. Don't assume the people in your life will wait for you to figure it out. Don't assume your future self will be stronger or wiser or more courageous. That version of you doesn't exist unless you build it now. And that's the trap, thinking you'll grow later, when in fact, growth only happens in the moments you'd rather avoid. That's why we study Stoicism, not just to endure what life throws at us, but to prepare ourselves for the urgency of now. To stop mistaking delay for safety. Because it's not safe. It's dangerous to assume the door will always be open. It's dangerous to believe that love, opportunity, or trust is something you can come back to when it's convenient. Life doesn't run on your schedule. It moves with or without your consent. And in Stoic relationships, it's the recognition of that truth, the fleeting nature of connection, that makes presence so vital. You cannot love someone later. You can only love them now. You cannot make amends in theory. You do it in real time, or not at all. So let go of the illusion that time is endless. Let go of the fantasy that you'll be ready one day. Readiness is a choice. Movement is a decision. Every second you hesitate, the door closes a little more. And one day, it shuts, not because someone slammed it, but because you let it drift that way. So don't just watch the door. Don't just think about what you'll do if it closes. Make this the moment you stop waiting. Make this the moment you move. Because the only real illusion is that you still have time. 2. Signals ignored and warnings unheeded. We rarely fall into failure or loss without warning. There are signs, always signs. Subtle shifts in energy, tone, timing. Moments where someone turns away a second too soon, or stops saying, "good night," with warmth. But we're masters at pretending not to see these things. We tell ourselves it's stress. It's just a phase. It'll pass. And so we continue on, distracted or defensive, as the foundation of something once meaningful begins to erode. Not in an explosion, but in silence. One ignored signal at a time. Why do we do this? Why do we ignore what's obvious in hindsight? Because seeing clearly requires courage, and courage demands responsibility. If we acknowledge something is wrong, we must act. And most people are more afraid of taking action than they are of losing what they love. This is where Stoicism becomes essential, not as a way to detach emotionally, but as a discipline to face truth without flinching. The Stoics didn't run from discomfort. They leaned into it. Because they knew that clarity was more valuable than comfort, and avoidance is the seed of every slow disaster. In Stoic relationships, emotional awareness is not optional, it's the foundation. You can't pretend to be present while mentally excusing yourself from the work. You can't claim to love someone while ignoring the patterns that tell you they're drifting. Yet that's exactly what many do. They convince themselves that silence means safety, and they underestimate how loudly absence speaks. The truth is, people rarely walk away all at once. They leave in inches, in changed habits, in unreturned touches, in conversations that used to stretch into the night but now end quickly, politely, without depth. And those are your chances, your windows, your warnings. The longer you ignore them, the fewer you get. Eventually, you're no longer being warned, you're being left. And by then, the signals have stopped not because everything is okay, but because they've given up trying to be heard. So let's pause for a second. Ask yourself, what signals have you ignored lately? What truth have you sensed but buried under rationalizations? Maybe it's a partner's fading patience. Maybe it's your own disengagement. Maybe it's something you need to say but haven't, because it feels too heavy. But here's the thing, heaviness doesn't disappear with silence. It just grows roots. You carry it longer. It shows up in your posture, your words, your distance. You can't hide what you refuse to face. And yet we try. We pretend we're okay. We act like everything's fine. We tell ourselves we're being strong by not stirring the water. But strength without honesty is just pride. And pride has ended more relationships than betrayal ever did. There's a moment in every breakdown where truth could have saved everything, but only if someone was brave enough to speak it. Stoicism doesn't promise that truth will always fix things. But it does promise that facing it gives you peace, even if the outcome is hard. Because nothing eats you alive like the thought, "I knew, and I still did nothing." That's the kind of regret that lingers. That follows you. That builds a quiet shame inside your chest. And for what? For the comfort of pretending? For the illusion of control? That's not peace, it's paralysis dressed up as patience. And it costs more than most realize. Because while you're convincing yourself that the situation isn't that bad, the person on the other side is quietly slipping away. They're waiting for you to notice, to act, to show that you see them. But you're too focused on your own fear to meet their eyes. And when they finally stop hoping, you'll call it sudden. You'll say, "I didn't see it coming." But you did. You just looked away. This is why emotional awareness matters. This is why checking in with reality, however uncomfortable, is an act of love. Especially in Stoic relationships, where the goal isn't to feel good all the time, but to live with integrity. To be present enough to catch the early signs, humble enough to admit when something's off, and strong enough to address it head on. The truth is, people want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be felt. And when that stops happening, they stop offering it. This is human nature. Attention and effort are not infinite. And the moment someone feels like they're alone in their connection with you, the unraveling begins. Slowly. Quietly. Predictably. And what's tragic is that many relationships could have survived if someone had paid attention sooner. If someone had said, "You seem distant, what's happening?" If someone had listened not just to the words, but to the silence between them. But those moments get missed because people are too busy, too distracted, or too scared. And fear, again, masquerades as many things: stoicism, logic, maturity. But in reality, it's just avoidance. And avoidance breeds decay. This is not theory. This is everyday reality. And if you're not careful, it becomes yours. So right now, reflect. What warning signs are present in your life, your work, your relationships? Where are you pretending not to see? And what would it cost you to face it today, before it becomes unfixable? Stoicism calls for that level of engagement. It tells you to stop seeking emotional safety at the expense of truth. Because truth is what keeps the door open. Truth, even when it stings, is what builds trust. And once trust dies, it rarely returns the same. So don't wait until the silence is permanent. Don't wait until the eyes that once looked at you with hope are now blank. Don't wait until "we need to talk" turns into "it's too late." You don't need permission to address what's real. You need courage. You need clarity. And both of those things start with awareness. So before you move on, ask yourself again. Are you seeing what's actually happening, or just what you hope is still true? Because time doesn't slow down for denial. It keeps moving. And if you're not responding to reality, reality is moving past you. Now, if this part of the video made something click for you, if it made you pause and think, then do this. Like this video and comment. Number 1. If you've ever experienced that slow fade in a relationship. And while you're here, hit that subscribe button, because what's coming next will take you deeper into what Stoic relationships actually demand from us, and how to rise to it. Let's keep going. 3. Fear masquerading as patience. There's a story we love to tell ourselves when we're scared. We dress it up in rationality and wisdom. We call it being patient, waiting for the right moment, not rushing into things. But if we look closer, really look, what we often call patience is nothing more than fear hiding in respectable clothes. Think about it. How many times have you delayed saying what mattered because you were waiting for the right time, when in fact, no such time ever came? How many times have you stood still not because you were being deliberate, but because you were afraid to be exposed, rejected, or wrong? We've been taught that waiting is a virtue. And in some cases it is. There's a kind of waiting that's rooted in wisdom, in discernment, in watching the right things unfold. But what most people practice isn't that. What they call waiting is often the refusal to act under the illusion that an action carries no consequence. It's emotional procrastination. And in relationships, this delay doesn't hold things in place, it erodes them. Because when you say nothing, people don't hear your silence as love. They hear it as distance, as doubt, as disinterest. And you may think you're preserving peace, but what you're really doing is building confusion, day by day. Stoicism teaches us to look at our impulses, our beliefs, and our justifications with clear eyes. So ask yourself honestly, are you really being patient, or are you avoiding discomfort? Because discomfort is the birthplace of truth. You don't grow in comfort. You don't connect in comfort. You don't repair anything meaningful by waiting for a moment when nothing feels risky. That moment doesn't exist. And while you stall, time doesn't. It's still moving. The other person is still feeling. The relationship is still evolving, sometimes for the better, but often away from you. And eventually, the distance you didn't speak about becomes the silence you can't break. You'll say you were giving space. You'll say you were letting things breathe. But in reality, you were scared to be seen. You were scared to show up without armor, to speak without the perfect words, to admit you didn't know what would happen if you opened up. And that fear doesn't make you bad or weak. It makes you human. But Stoicism doesn't leave you there. It invites you to master the fear, not surrender to it. Because fear never leaves by being ignored. It grows in the quiet. It expands in the space where courage should have stood. In Stoic relationships, hesitation driven by fear is the root of decay. Because love is not sustained by safety, it's sustained by showing up fully. honestly. Especially when it's hard. And here's the heartbreaking part. People wait too long out of fear, and then blame fate when things fall apart. They say, "It wasn't meant to be," when in fact they simply didn't show up in time. They say, "I was giving them space," when in truth they were giving into avoidance. This is how we fool ourselves. We believe that not acting protects us. That if we just hold off a little longer, clarity will come. The right words will arrive. The storm will pass. But often, the window was never waiting to open wider. It was slowly closing while you stood in front of it. Fear convinces us that we'll be better prepared later. But preparation without action is just delay. And delay, repeated, becomes a habit. A way of living that always puts the important things on tomorrow's schedule. That's not stoicism. That's spiritual cowardice. Because stoicism isn't about being calm while doing nothing. It's about being calm while doing what must be done. Even when it terrifies you. Even when you might lose. Even when the outcome is uncertain. And if we're honest, most people don't fear the outcome, they fear the responsibility of trying. Because trying means you care. It means you're invested. It means if you fail, it's on you. But guess what? That's the cost of love. That's the cost of showing up. And the people who matter in your life? They're not waiting for perfect words. They're waiting for your presence. They're waiting for your honesty. They're waiting to see that you care enough to act, not just think about acting. That's the paradox. The longer you wait to act out of fear, the more damage you create. The very thing you were trying to avoid in the first place. And often, by the time you muster the courage to speak, they've already stopped listening. That moment you feared so much has come and gone, and now you're not just late, you're irrelevant. It's a harsh truth, but a necessary one. Because if you don't recognize fear for what it is, it will keep showing up dressed as patience, and it will keep stealing your moments. Over and over. You'll keep calling your hesitation wisdom, and you'll keep losing what matters most. This is why self-inquiry is a pillar of stoicism. You must examine your motives ruthlessly. You must ask yourself, what am I avoiding right now that needs to be faced? What conversation have I delayed because I'm afraid of where it might go? What truth am I sitting on because I want to be liked more than I want to be real? And most importantly, what will it cost me if I keep waiting? Because time is not infinite. Opportunities are not guaranteed. And the people who love you are not immune to exhaustion. Even the kindest souls eventually stop waiting. And when they do, your excuses won't hold weight. They'll just echo in an empty room. So if you think patience is your virtue, test it. Ask yourself if it's aligned with courage or fear. Ask if it's serving the relationship or serving your comfort. Because if you're being honest, you'll often find that what looks like patience is simply you holding back, hoping someone else will make the first move. But Stoic relationships don't work that way. They require initiative. They require you to take the step, even when your legs are shaking. They require you to risk being misunderstood in order to be known. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not in a relationship, you're in a performance. A carefully curated image of connection, where no real intimacy can grow. Because intimacy isn't built in perfect timing, it's built in brave moments. It's built when you speak the thing you'd rather bury. It's built when you own your fear instead of masking it with spiritual language or emotional detachment. That's real strength. That's what Stoicism prepares you for, not the comfort of delay, but the discipline to act when everything in you wants to wait. So stop letting fear write your story. Stop calling your paralysis patience. And stop waiting for a moment that will never feel safe. Make the move now. Speak the words now. Because if you don't, the silence you're using to protect yourself will become the silence that ends everything. And when it does, you'll realize it wasn't fate that closed the door. It was fear, your fear, posing as patience. 4. The turning point that never came. There's a moment people wait for, the turning point, the breakthrough, the shift that suddenly makes everything right. They think if they wait long enough, things will align. The other person will finally understand. The perfect timing will arrive. The words will come more easily. The pain will lessen just enough to speak. But that moment, the moment that makes everything effortless, rarely comes. And while you're waiting for it, life continues. So does disconnection. So does decay. And soon enough, you're not waiting at all, you're simply drifting. The idea of the turning point is comforting. It's romantic. It promises resolution without confrontation, healing without disruption, change without sacrifice. But in truth, it's often just another delay tactic. A fantasy we create to justify not doing the hard work now. How many people have lost someone they loved because they assumed a future moment would be the right one to act? How many sat silently in relationships that were unraveling, clinging to the hope that, one day, they'd both wake up different, more open, more forgiving, more aligned? That day never came. It rarely does. Because people don't just change. People grow when there is intention. And intention only arises in the present, not in the imaginary later we keep hoping for. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. Things don't resolve themselves. And sometimes, the most devastating thing about a lost connection isn't the pain, it's the realization that it could have been saved, but both people were waiting for the other to move first. The turning point never came because no one turned. No one shifted. No one made the decision that matters. In Stoic relationships, the turning point isn't a date on the calendar. It's a mindset shift. A moment of choice. A deliberate effort to act with clarity despite uncertainty. But when fear and pride rule the moment, people wait. They hope. They resist. And eventually, the very change they were hoping would come, arrives too late. It shows up as a goodbye instead of a reconciliation. It arrives in the form of a door that's not just closed, but locked. And what's worse is that the regret is compounded by the simplicity of what could have changed everything. A conversation. A confession. An apology. An act of vulnerability. So many massive losses rest on the shoulders of tiny moments where someone just didn't move. And they tell themselves, I didn't want to force it. Or, I didn't want to make things worse. But what they really didn't want was to feel exposed, or wrong, or weak. And that is where Stoicism calls us higher. Not to ignore emotion, but to rise above the fear of discomfort. Because the discomfort of honesty is nothing compared to the agony of regret. And that's what you're left with when the turning point doesn't come: regret. A burning, slow ache of knowing you were right there, and did nothing. That you were close enough to change the outcome, but waited for a sign instead of being the signal. You can feel it, can't you? That unease, that tension of having been on the edge of something meaningful, but letting the moment pass. And what makes it worse is knowing it wasn't some grand event that destroyed things. It was the silence. The stillness. The absence of action. We often imagine change as this big, dramatic event. But in real life, most change happens quietly. Incrementally. Through choices that seem small at the time. And the people who master their lives, the ones who live with peace, aren't waiting for moments to feel right. They're creating them. They're choosing to move when it matters, not when it feels easy. That's what Stoicism is at its core, the discipline to take responsibility for what is in your control, and the wisdom to stop waiting for what isn't. You cannot control the other person. You cannot control timing. But you can control whether you let fear dictate your actions. You can control whether you choose to be present now, instead of postponing the conversation for another day that may never come. And that's what I want you to take from this part. The turning point you're waiting for is not a moment you find. It's a moment you create. With honesty. With courage. With movement. Because time doesn't wait for anyone. And while you sit, hoping for change, the window of possibility is narrowing. And soon it's gone. Then all you're left with is almost. And there's nothing more painful than a life full of almosts. Almost had that connection. Almost saved that relationship. Almost became who you knew you could be. But Stoicism doesn't leave you in that place. It pulls you out. It says, don't waste time wishing for a perfect moment. Use the moment you have now. Make the call. Send the message. Speak the truth. Because the longer you wait, the more final the silence becomes. You don't have forever. The people in your life don't either. And if you keep waiting for a turning point without moving, you'll wake up one day and realize the story already ended, without a climax, without a resolution, without a change. Just a slow fade into nothing. And you'll realize it wasn't fate. It wasn't bad luck. It was your decision, disguised as indecision. So let this be the moment where you stop waiting. Where you stop pretending that hesitation is strategy. Where you stop believing that silence will fix itself. This is your call to act. Your reminder that you don't need more time, you need more courage. And if this message hit home, if you felt even a flicker of truth in these words, then go ahead and like this video and comment, number 1, if it spoke to you. And if you want more of this kind of clarity, if you want to keep showing up with strength, insight, and emotional honesty, subscribe now. There's more to come, and you won't want to miss it. 5. The cost of inaction. Inaction has a cost, and it's always higher than we think. People love to believe that doing nothing keeps things the same, that not choosing somehow preserves the status quo. But that's a lie we tell ourselves to avoid discomfort. The truth is, when you don't act, you are still deciding. Every moment you delay, every truth you hold back, every time you choose silence over sincerity, you're paying a price, and it adds up. You may not feel it immediately, but it accumulates in subtle, powerful ways. Inaction corrodes connection. It creates confusion. It builds distance. You think you're keeping the peace, but you're actually letting the foundation crack. And by the time you notice, the structure has weakened beyond repair. In Stoic Relationships, avoiding a difficult conversation doesn't spare you from pain, it just postpones it and magnifies the damage. You end up paying interest on emotional debt, and often, it costs you the very thing you were trying to protect. People walk away not because they wanted to, but because they felt like they were alone in the effort. And that's the hidden cost of inaction. You become absent even when you're physically there. Your energy shifts. Your presence fades. You stop showing up emotionally, and the other person starts to carry the weight alone. They question themselves. They feel rejected, confused, hurt. And all the while, you think you're doing the right thing by staying silent. But silence isn't neutral. It speaks. Loudly. It says, "I don't care enough to fix this." Or, "I'd rather avoid this than face it with you." And over time, those unspoken messages pile up. They turn into resentment. Into distance. Into a final, quiet separation that no one announces, but everyone feels. Stoicism teaches that while we don't control outcomes, we do control actions. And inaction is still a form of action. It's a decision. A choice to let the moment pass, to let the opportunity expire, to let the relationship starve while you tell yourself you're waiting for the right time. But the right time often never comes. And the window doesn't stay open just because you want it to. There is a deep arrogance in assuming that people and opportunities will wait for you to gather courage. That life will pause until you feel safe enough to show up. It won't. And by the time you're ready, what you needed to save might already be gone. This is not about panic, it's about presence. The cost of inaction is not just external loss, but internal erosion. You lose confidence in yourself. You become someone who watches life happen instead of participating in it. You begin to mistrust your own instincts, because every time they prompt you to act, you hesitate. And each hesitation makes the next one easier. Until eventually you become someone who lives entirely in reaction, or worse, in regret. Stoicism warns us against living this way. It calls us to be engaged, intentional, awake. To understand that discipline is not just about restraint, but about showing up fully in the moments that matter. When you let those moments pass, you betray not just others, but yourself. You know what you needed to do. You knew it in your gut, in your chest, in that quiet voice inside that urged you to move. But you waited. And the more you wait, the more you reinforce the identity of someone who does not act, who watches life from the sidelines. And that identity becomes a prison. A quiet, polite, respectable prison made of excuses and missed chances. That's the price. And it's steep. You pay in broken relationships, in lost time, in the pain of watching someone walk away while you hold on to the words you never said. You pay in sleepless nights where your mind replays everything you didn't do. You pay in watching someone else show up in the space you were too hesitant to fill. You pay in erosion of trust, of connection, of opportunity. And all because you were trying to avoid discomfort. But discomfort is temporary. Regret is not. Discomfort passes. Regret stays. It stays in your memory, your muscle, your identity. It whispers to you in the quiet moments and shows up in future decisions, making you second-guess yourself, because you know what happened the last time you didn't act. This is why Stoicism isn't just a philosophy, it's a way of protecting yourself. From your tendencies to delay, to rationalize, to fear. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be fearless. It asks you to act in spite of fear. Because if you don't, the cost compounds. And when you finally realize what you've lost, it's not just the relationship or the opportunity, it's your own integrity. Your ability to trust yourself to rise when it counts. That's a deeper kind of loss, and it's harder to repair. So when we talk about the cost of inaction, we're not just talking about mischances, we're talking about self-betrayal. We're talking about a slow, quiet erosion of your strength, your voice, your power. And no one sees it happening at first. On the outside, everything looks the same. But inside, you feel it. That heaviness. That shame. That ache of knowing you let something slip away not because it was impossible, but because you didn't move. And that's a hard truth to carry. But here's the thing, it's not too late to stop the pattern. Every moment you're given now is a moment to act, to repair, to speak, to choose differently. But you have to see the cost for what it is. You have to stop pretending that waiting is neutral, or that silence is safer than honesty. It's not. Inaction is expensive. And the longer you take to realize that, the more you pay. So take inventory of your life. Where are you hesitating? Where are you delaying the inevitable? What action do you keep pushing off, hoping it'll solve itself? And what would happen if you acted now? Not perfectly. Not dramatically. Just honestly. What would change if you stopped making comfort the priority and made clarity the goal? These are the questions Stoicism demands. These are the questions that bring you back into your life instead of letting it pass you by. Because at the end of the day, the greatest cost of inaction is not what you lose, it's what you become. And you deserve to become someone who acts with courage, not someone who watches with regret. 6. When the door finally closed. There comes a moment, not loud, not dramatic, not even clearly defined, when the door finally closes. You don't always notice it when it happens. It might feel like just another quiet evening. A message left unread. A conversation that ends too soon. But underneath, something irreversible has shifted. The energy has changed. The connection has fractured. And the door, the one you always assumed would stay open, has gently, firmly closed. At first, you don't believe it. You think it's just a phase, a mood, a misunderstanding. You replay the last few interactions, looking for signs, for cracks you could patch up. But deep down you know. You know because something feels hollow now. You knock, and no one answers the same way. You reach out, and the warmth is missing. There's no fight left, no spark, no curiosity. Just polite exchanges or, worse, silence. That's when it hits you. Not with fire, but with weight. A deep, quiet heaviness in the chest. The realization that you waited too long. That your timing was off. That the moment to act, to repair, to choose, has passed. This is the moment many people never talk about, the emotional aftermath of delay, the dull pain of what could have been but no longer can be. And what makes it unbearable is knowing the door didn't close because of some catastrophic event. It wasn't slammed shut. It simply stopped staying open. And you were there, right there, as it slowly drifted toward finality. Stoicism doesn't shield you from this moment. It prepares you for it. It reminds you that nothing is permanent, not people, not opportunities, not doors. Everything is on loan. And if you treat what's meaningful as though it will last forever without effort, without presence, you will lose it. That's not cruelty. That's life. In Stoic relationships, you learn that love, like any fire, dies when it's not fed. It fades when neglected. It cools when you stop choosing it actively, daily, bravely. And if you believe that simply being there is enough, that showing up occasionally is sufficient, you're missing the point. Presence is not proximity. It's engagement. It's showing up with your full self, not just your physical body. And when you stop doing that, when your efforts become inconsistent, your words become filtered, your attention becomes divided, that door begins to close. Slowly. Quietly. Inevitably. And while you may not notice it right away, the other person does. They feel the shift. They carry the silence. They count the times you looked away instead of leaning in. And they start to wonder if it's worth staying. At first, they hold on. They rationalize. They hope. But eventually, even the most loyal heart gets tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of wondering. Tired of trying alone. And when they finally step back, it's not out of anger. It's out of acceptance. Acceptance that the door they were standing in front of is no longer open. That what once felt like a shared space is now one-sided. And that's when it's over, not in chaos, not in a fight, but in silence. The silence of someone who no longer believes their presence matters. And for you, the realization comes late. You start to feel the distance. You sense the absence. You notice the conversations feel mechanical. And when you finally try to reach out, when you decide to act, it's too late. Because the door isn't just closed. It's locked. And on the other side, they've moved on. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. They've found peace in letting go. And all you're left with is the echo of what you didn't do. You tell yourself it wasn't fair. That they should have warned you. That they should have said something. But the truth? They did. In their tone, in their eyes, in their shrinking presence. You just didn't listen. Or worse, you listened and still chose not to act. That's the sting. That's the consequence. That's the lesson Stoicism urges us to absorb deeply. Do not wait for what matters. Do not assume the door will stay open. Do not believe that silence buys you time. It doesn't. It buys you regret. And once you learn this the hard way, you start to see every moment differently. You realize how precious honesty is. How sacred effort is. How rare it is for someone to stay, to fight, to try. And when they do, you show up. Because you've lived the alternative. You've felt the finality. You've seen what happens when the door finally closes. And it doesn't open again, not because of punishment, but because something died in the waiting. That's the part most people miss. It's not about blame. It's about energy. About trust. About the slow erosion of belief that this was worth fighting for. And once that belief is gone, words can't bring it back. Promises can't revive it. Only presence could have preserved it, but that presence needed to happen before. Not now. Not when it's convenient. Not when it hurts. Before. That's the cost. That's the scar. That's the door. And once you've seen it close, you carry that awareness into every future interaction. You stop assuming. You start engaging. You stop delaying. You start acting. Because now you know, not all doors slam. Some just stop opening. And that's worse. So if you've ever been there, if this truth resonates deep in your chest, then this is your moment to rise. To become someone who doesn't wait for clarity to act. Who doesn't need a perfect mood to speak. Who understands that the window of connection is narrow and fleeting, and that the courage to show up is always more valuable than the comfort of staying silent. If this part of the video woke something up in you, like it now and comment, number 1, if you've ever felt that final closing of a door. And don't forget to subscribe, because what we cover next is where change begins, where wisdom takes shape, and where your next opportunity won't be missed. Let's continue. 7. What we can learn from lost opportunities. Lost opportunities, while painful, are powerful teachers. They cut deep, but they leave behind clarity if we're willing to look. And in that clarity lies transformation, not the kind that comes from comfort or success, but from facing what we failed to do, what we delayed too long, what we ignored until it disappeared. This is where growth lies, not in the perfect moment, but in the aftermath of a missed one. We look back at the closed doors and see all the ways we could have moved differently. We see the warning signs we dismissed, the fears we disguised as patience, the words we should have spoken, the courage we never summoned. But this reflection, though painful, is essential. Because if we don't learn from these moments, we repeat them. Again and again. Different faces. Different seasons. Same outcome. Stoicism teaches us to use loss not as an anchor, but as fuel, to feel the sting without being paralyzed by it, to look at the past not with self-pity but with precision. Where did I hesitate? Where did I assume time was on my side? Where did I wait for someone else to act instead of owning my responsibility? These questions are not easy, but they're necessary. Because understanding what we lost is the first step in making sure we don't lose the next chance. And there will be another chance. Maybe not with the same person. Maybe not in the same form. But life offers us repeated invitations to show up with more clarity, more urgency, more presence. The door that closed was real. It mattered. But it wasn't the last door. It was the one that taught you what you needed to see, the cost of delay, the price of fear, the danger of assuming you have more time. When we study Stoicism, we realize that everything is temporary, not just the external world, but our internal states. Emotions pass. Opportunities evolve. Relationships shift. Nothing stays exactly as it is. And that truth is not meant to make us cold, it's meant to make us awake. To stop drifting. To stop numbing. To live with eyes wide open, knowing that today could be the last chance we get to say what matters, to fix what's fractured, to act on what we feel. Lost opportunities burned because they were real. They held meaning. They held potential. But that potential wasn't enough. It needed action. It needed decision. It needed movement. And when we didn't provide those things, the door closed, not out of punishment, but because that's how life works. Nature doesn't wait. The universe doesn't hold open doors forever. Stoicism calls this understanding the nature of impermanence, not to depress us, but to strengthen us. Because once you accept that everything is passing, you begin to prioritize what truly matters. You stop wasting time on ego. You stop pretending silence is noble. You stop waiting for permission to live fully. And you begin to embody presence, not as a buzzword, but as a way of existing in every interaction, every opportunity, every love, every loss. The lessons of missed chances are not meant to make you shrink. They're meant to make you precise, aware, intentional. So that the next time you feel something important rising inside you, the next time a relationship feels like it's on the edge, or a choice feels too big to make, you remember what happened the last time you waited. And you don't repeat it. You move. You speak. You act. That is what it means to apply Stoicism in real life, not just to reflect, but to respond. Not just to regret, but to redirect. The pain of a closed door becomes your compass. It points you toward a new way of living. You become less reactive, more reflective. You stop arguing with reality and start responding to it. You stop expecting certainty and start embracing action anyway. And you stop taking time for granted. That is the ultimate shift. That is what Stoic relationships are built on. Not on perfect timing, but on imperfect effort, consistent action, and the willingness to show up even when you don't have all the answers. Because that's what love really is. Not a feeling, but a series of choices. Daily ones, risky ones, honest ones. And every missed opportunity reminds us of that truth. It shows us the price of waiting too long. It teaches us to stop living in potential and start living in reality. So if you've lost something, or someone, because you waited too long, Let it break you open. Let it sharpen your instincts. Let it fuel your next decision. Because that pain you feel, that regret in your chest, that is your teacher now. And if you honor it, it won't destroy you. It will refine you. It will make you stronger, not in a hard, closed-off way, but in a conscious, compassionate way. You'll love deeper because you know what happens when love is left unspoken. You'll act sooner because you understand how fast the window can close. And you'll forgive faster. Not because people deserve it, but because you know time is too short to carry old weight. That's what we learn from lost opportunities. That doors don't stay open forever. That waiting is not always wise. And that life rewards those who show up, not perfectly, but presently. So look back, yes. Reflect deeply. But don't stay there. The door may be closed, but you're still here. You're still breathing. And that means you still have chances left to move with clarity, with courage, with love. That's the gift hidden in the loss. Don't waste it. So here we are, at the end of the story, not just a story about someone else, but possibly your own. A story of waiting, of silence, of inaction, and the door that eventually closed. Maybe that door was a relationship. Maybe it was a chance to speak your truth. Maybe it was a version of yourself you were too afraid to become. Whatever it was, you now see what waiting too long really costs. But this isn't a story meant to leave you in regret. This is a wake-up call, a reminder that life is not measured by intentions, but by actions. That relationships aren't preserved by promises, but by presence. That the right time is a myth we use to shield ourselves from the responsibility of now. If this video brought up memories, if it stirred something inside you, good. Because that means there's still something alive in you that refuses to sleep through life. You may not be able to reopen the door that's already closed, but you can stop another one from shutting while you stand by. You can stop telling yourself there will be another chance. You can stop assuming that people will always wait. Because now you know, they won't. And they shouldn't have to. We're not here to drift. We're here to choose. With clarity. With courage. With urgency. Stoicism isn't about suppressing your emotions, it's about moving through them with strength. It's about seeing things as they are, not as we wish they were, and still deciding to show up. Fully. Presently. Especially in Stoic relationships, the most powerful thing you can do is act when it matters, not when it's easy. And what matters is now. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Now. If this message resonated with you, if it reached a part of you that's been silent for too long, then make a decision right now to live differently. To stop waiting. To start speaking. To start doing. To own your story instead of replaying the same regret. And if this video gave you even one moment of clarity, if it helped you see yourself or your situation more honestly, then take a second to like this video and comment, number 1, down below. Let us know that this message mattered to you. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, because this isn't the end. This is just the beginning. There are more truths to uncover, more strength to build, more clarity to walk in. And you won't want to miss any of it. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Thank you for having the courage to face the truth. And most of all, thank you for choosing growth over comfort. Until next time, stay sharp, stay grounded, and don't wait for the door to close before you decide to move.